Hi, everyone. This is Karen Smiley. Welcome to 6Ps and AI Pods. This post is part of our AI 6P interview series on AI, software, and wetware. Our guests share their experiences with using AI and how they feel about AI using their data and content. I am delighted to welcome Nnitiwe from Nigeria as my guest today on AI, software, and wetware. Nnitiwe, thank you so much for joining me on this interview. Please tell us about yourself, who you are, and what you do.
Thank you for having me, Karen. I am Samuel Theophilus, and I am an AI and data engineer with over 6 years of experience. I have consulted with companies and worked for non-governmental organizations both in Nigeria and abroad. I basically integrate AI solutions into business processes, so automating all SOPs, and also I have had the privilege to mentor data professionals, AI enthusiasts into both complete beginners, non-technical professionals, and also technical professionals who are trying to transition from software development to AI, data science, data engineering. And I also currently run a Nnitiwe AI blog, and basically that's the blog where I share my experience or expertise working with how to build AI tools, integrate AI into business solutions, and then with a lot of hands-on experience for readers. So currently, that's high level of what I do technically. So I hope that addresses the question.
Yes, very much. You also mentioned that you worked on some organizations with societal impact, and I thought that was very interesting.
Here in Nigeria, I've worked with climate change NGOs, and I've also partnered with a humanitarian body to build feedback response solutions to track complaints from beneficiaries after humanitarian projects or after distributions of aid and resources. So build AI-powered solutions to help simplify the process of tracking feedback and tracking some of the complaints. These are some of the projects I've done in the humanitarian space. And also with a crime-focused NGO that tracks organized crime. So tracking the media for crime reports, basically indexing, tracking the media, and also helping the NGO to be on top, automating a lot of their monitoring activities. Yes, so this high level of what I've done with respect to humanitarian NGOs.
It's really great to hear about that. So that's very commendable. So appreciate that you're doing that. That's some amazing work. And it's great that your AI blog is being widely read as well. 59 countries is great. And we'll include a link to that in this article when we publish the interview. Can you tell me a little bit about your level of experience with AI and machine learning and analytics? You talked a little bit about your years of experience. Sounds like you've used it professionally. Maybe you've also used it personally and studied the technology.
Yes, I actually have a technical background. I have a computer science degree. So pending even before the chat GPT era, before the LLM and the breakthrough in AI recently, that generative AI, I've worked with tools like TensorFlow, like PyTorch, Scikit-learn. I have been in data science space. I also worked on research. As a matter of fact, 2019, I had a publication on IEEE where I worked on an automated cataract detection solution using neural networks. So I had some experience with AI. I also have worked with tools like AWS cloud platforms. I've worked in various roles, machine learning engineer, ML engineering, and also data engineering roles. So I have the technical experience with the cloud solutions as well as writing code, that's building traders, training models, fine-tuning models, and also integrating AI-powered APIs. So I have mainly focused on computer vision and natural language processing. And I've collaborated with startups and remote companies on various projects from precision farming down to digital twin projects, computer vision projects. Example, for the precision farming project, the objective was to try to optimize the application of herbicides on on farmlands. And basically what we did was to build computer vision models that would detect weeds on auto photos. Drone images are captured of large farmlands, and then these images are now processed, and then we detect weeds on the farm, and then after detection, this weed is now passed through the data pipeline and sent back to the startup, and the startup is using this detection to optimize the application of herbicides so that when applying these herbicides, only the noise of these herbicides was only activated at the point where weeds are detected, and this reduced application by 60%. So this is an example of a practical application of AI long before ChatGPT era. So in summary, yes, I've had some technical experience with AI for some time now.
Yeah, it's pretty common nowadays when people talk about AI, what they really mean is generative AI. And a lot of people just don't realize that there are all these other machine learning applications that we've had for years, very practical solutions to practical problems. And I think that's really great to hear. So I'm curious, you mentioned using the OpenAI API. Do you use any of the large language models for research or for learning or for any other purposes in your work?
Okay, yes. So aside the OpenAI API, I also work with cloud. Yes, when it comes to LLMs, I don't like to stick to just one. So I use Grok, I use Cloud, I use DeepSeek and Gemini as well. And then also I work with Notebook LM depending on the task at hand. So when I'm trying to like research, maybe just like go through a number of materials just to understand a high level. Sometimes I like working with Notebook LM because it provides a very good way to digest a lot of content from PDFs, links, and so on. So I use that when I want to ingest or that just basically go high level into a lot of resources to see what I want to dive deeper into. I also use tools like Napkin as a technical writer. I love to create visualizations using Napkin. On my blog, you get to see a lot of visualizations, cool graphics, flow diagrams that I have generated with Napkin. So it helps me to be able to speed up that process. So that's one very good use of Napkin. Another tool I work with. For phone, sometimes I use so Whisk is a Google AI tool, and it just helps you create not just comics, but if you're interested in entertainment, whether it's 2D animations or videos or static images. So Wix is also a tool I use and play with from time to time. These are some of the tools I work with.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about your IEEE paper. I think you said it was on deep learning for medical image analysis. I had written a short article earlier this year. There's a company called Annalise.ai in Australia, and they were using AI to improve the accuracy of diagnosing lung cancer on chest x-rays, which is something I'm really interested in. Could you tell us a little bit more about your paper and how you used deep learning for the medical image analysis?
Okay, yes. So for the medical image analysis, the goal of the project was to be able to use AI to minimize because even though cataract is a treatable disease, it was meant to be a foundation because there are a lot of eye diseases or eye issues that if not treated on time, can lead to total complete blindness. And in Nigeria, especially with developing healthcare, it still has a lot to do to get to a place where healthcare is quite acceptable. That was what drove the project. So my dad is actually an ophthalmologist, and I worked with him to just get an idea on this project. And basically, what this research was about was using AI at 2017, 2018 to diagnose eye images. We have a collection of eye images, right? And then you use AI to detect if it has traces of cataract in that eye image or not. And then achieved a good level of accuracy at least and it was published. I'm sure now a lot of research has been done. The last time I checked, I think we had about 23 citations, but the idea is to be able to grow into a point where fundus images in healthcare is used to do a lot of diagnosis to detect retinopathy, traces of retinopathy, diabetic retinopathy, traces of glaucoma, and the rest. The idea was to be able to build the project to a point where you can detect these defects early so that people in rural areas can can be aware of their health challenges and then seek medical attention in time. So that's what the project was about and it was published and currently it has over 20 citations.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah, I love hearing about projects like that where people are using machine learning to solve problems and to actually help things and make the world better. So I love that application. You mentioned some of the LLMs that you use. Are there any that you use for personal or professional tasks or just for fun, writing or music or art or social media, things like that?
Okay, yes, why I'm trying to play with video generation for fun. I use Whisk and then I've worked with Flow as well. Flow uses Google's VO3 behind the scenes. So I've used that to generate short film clips for fun. And then you have Suno. I haven't really created, but I've seen in play. But mostly it's Whisk and then Google's Flow, which is basically a short film creation tool. So these are some of the tools. And then also 11 Labs. So I've played with 11 Labs for voice. generation, and then also, yeah. So these are some of the examples of AI tools I've worked with.
With 11
Yeah,
Labs, did you try to clone your own voice?
I'm aware of the feature, but I didn't clone my voice. So I've actually tried to use Nigerian teamed voices on 11 Labs. I know 11 Labs has a voice library. I've worked with the Nigerian libraries, but I haven't cloned my voice.
Okay. I'm curious. I know a few people that have tried it. One was quite happy with it and used it for a while on her Substack blog and her podcast. And another said it felt like it was in the uncanny valley and didn't like the sound. It sounded like him to me, but he did not like it himself. So I was just curious if you had tried it.
Yes, I think the reason why personally I haven't tried it is because I feel like it's too perfect, except maybe changes have been made. But if you look at the voice generation by Google, when you use Notebook LM to generate the podcasts, it feels more natural. That is my personal opinion. Where you get to hear things, even the pauses, even you get the flow, it feels more natural. So maybe if Google had a clone too, I might have considered it because I felt that was more natural. So the 11 Labs is quite okay, but I think one of the reasons was it's going to be too perfect, or it won't be a very good representation of me. Let me put it that way. Maybe that's one of the things that slowed my desire to use it to clone my voice. Let me put it that way.
I'd like to hear if you have a specific story on how you've used a tool that included AI and machine learning features. I'm curious about what your thoughts are on how the AI features of those tools worked for you or didn't. So basically, what went well and what didn't go so well with your project.
Okay, yes. So, like I started sharing earlier, I worked with the humanitarian NGO to build a feedback system that tried to track complaints. On this project, one of the functionalities that was required was building an interface that could handle voice, images, videos, and text as well. So, irrespective of what the user sends a video, then the AI should be able to handle that. If it sends a text or an audio, it should be able to automatically handle all those inputs. I worked with Google because so far, I think Google's AI speech library does a good job when it comes to handling Nigerian, maybe because of their large user base and their presence in the Nigerian space as well. So it has very good understanding of local languages here, the Hausa, the Igbo, Yoruba, and some of these other languages. So I worked with Google's speech to text. That's the speech to text API. And then the issue I faced was that it struggled to detect the language because the idea is if you receive an audio, in order to be able to handle it properly, you need to first detect what language is being spoken so that you can transcribe that into the appropriate text. So if it fails to detect the language that's spoken, it won't get the job done. So sometimes while testing, I discovered it failed. A lot of times it failed, and maybe because the specific models that are available for that particular function were not very rich in local language. That's we're not very trained in local languages. So it worked very fine with English, irrespective of your intonation, your accent. But when it comes to Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba, it struggled. So that's one of the issues. And then I had to implement a fallback so that it handles it via text if it fails the checks. So that was one way it was limited, but it was very good. It was interesting to see how it was able to generate when it comes to text, being able to generate because I integrated OpenAI's API as well. And when it comes to text, it handled some of this, it handled translation and text generation very well, like almost 100%. It rarely failed. But when it comes to the text, and I think that's because in Nigeria, like I said, one of the issues we have is the index. There's poor indexing of data, whether it's text, video, audio. There needs to be an improvement, or we need to take that more seriously. So with improvement in that area, I believe that AI solutions powered by data, of course, would improve the ability to detect and handle local attacks.
Yeah, that sounds like a really cool project. Language is so important. And it sounds like you were able to get a really high level of accuracy on that, which is awesome. Aside from this feedback agent project, can you have any examples of times that you used an AI tool? Maybe one example of when an AI tool worked well for you and one of when it didn't work well for you. This is just using the tool as a normal user, not as a developer.
Okay, as a user, I use Flow. That's another example where there were some limitations. So Google VO3, of course, is one of the best performing image generation models of recent of times. but it struggled with character consistency. And it's not just a Google VO3 issue. I think generally, until the recent Nano Banana release, a lot of models have struggled with character consistency. So when you are trying to generate a video, especially different frames, a lot of AI video generation tools have 8 seconds, 16 seconds window for generating a particular clip. So in order to generate a short film, you need to be able to combine a lot of short clips or extend. But one issue I faced working with these tools, Pika and the rest, is when combining or extending, you have character inconsistency because you are generating this with prompts. And even when you use image references, it's good, but it's not very strong. So that's one of the limitations, especially even with Flow. It was the best so far, but it still struggled with that. So hopefully
Mhm.
with Nano Banana, the progress of character consistency in Nano Banana, I believe we should be expecting some improvements in the video version of in the video generation with tools like Veo and the rest. But that was one of the issues I had while using AI tools where it didn't really do what I wanted it to do.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that story. I'm wondering if you have avoided using AI-based tools for some things or for anything. Could you share an example of when you've avoided an AI tool and why you chose not to use it for that?
Okay, yes. So I love to be in control of my creative process. So most times I avoid AI tools at the initial phases of my work, even with technical writing. I don't just go to maybe ChatGPT or Cloud or Gemini and then type just write this article for me. No, I pick my theme, the topic, and what I want to discuss. I draft the initial piece of this article and then just use AI to critique to get additional point of views and see if I've missed anything, if there's anything I need to add to make it more compelling. At the end of the day, what I'm trying to communicate is still original to me, even though I might use AI to do some grammar checks and the rest. These are the areas where I try to avoid AI tools to implement that. In as much as I agree that AI can be integrated to boost productivity, I also try to be conscious of the areas I automate. For instance, I don't see myself automating my communication pipeline. I don't see myself implementing an email automated responder because I feel it defeats the point. So I won't use that. So I've not implemented that. I want to be able to check my mails, understand, be up to speed of the conversations and be in control of the response and things like that. So even when AI is able to generate smart responses, I don't want a situation whereby I miss the flow of conversation because I didn't read the mail and AI just automatically responded. So once I have the draft emails, when I have what I have to communicate, and they just use AI to maybe refine are there tech grammar adjustments or are there things I didn't cover, things I missed that I can just include? So these are the areas I use AI while working to stay in control of my creative process and in control of whatever solutions or work, even when it comes to code as well. I don't vibe code. I use AI to generate the functions mainly after I have clearly designed the pipeline, what I want to be done. So even when AI generates pieces of whatever solution or whatever I'm working on, I still vet and validate the results before integrating them into the overall solution.
Yeah, that's definitely wise to check it because it can generate some strange things. So, which tool do you prefer when you're writing code or for helping you to validate your code?
Okay, so for tools, I prefer Cloud. I've noticed that Cloud has high accuracy generating executable code. So that's my go-to when it comes to code. But sometimes when debugging, I work with ChatGPT. But for generation, Cloud has high success rates of generating executable code. When it comes to blogging or fine-tuning, I use ChatGPT to research themes and just do some research. So I use a lot of these tools and then based on the response, if I'm not comfortable with the response, sometimes I try a different tool. I'm not fixed to one. I just try to use that and then see if it aligns with what I want. And then if I like the response, and then I decide to pick it or discard it as well.
Yeah, you've got quite a toolbox there with a lot of different AI tools in it.
Yes.
One concern that we hear a lot about nowadays is where these AI and machine learning systems get the data and the content that they train on. A lot of times they will use data that users have put into online systems or we've published online. And these companies are not always very transparent about how they intend to use our data when we sign up for the services. I'm wondering how you feel about companies that use data and content for training their AI systems and tools, and specifically wondering your thoughts about whether to be an ethical company, they should be required to follow what some people call the 3 C's rule that came from CIPRI, which is consent and credit and compensation to the people whose data they want to use for training.
Yes, so I am 100% in support of following the 3 C's rule because I believe that transparency shouldn't be optional. It should be enforced. That's why personally I've tried to ensure that while building the solutions, I'm making sure that the solutions I'm building adhere to like GDPR and then also the NPR regulations or policies, right? So I believe that companies should be transparent about this data. And unfortunately, when you look at some of the legal cases, they haven't been fully transparent. For instance, when you look at, I think the first time when ChatGPT came up, there was some transparency on the sources of data, of the sources of data that were trained. You know, like, okay, Common Crawl was a source, and then Wikipedia, and then some other sources. But over time, most of these companies have been silent about the sources. Some maybe they don't want their competitors to also have an edge, but still, believe that's a flaw that needs to be addressed. There should be transparency with all these cases, and that's why they had a lot of legal cases. But I believe there should be transparency. And also, when building, I try to ensure that I'm very careful. Most of the use cases, I use AI to handle like processing, summary, extraction of data, but hardly for content generation or full process. Not that I'm completely against it, but these are areas where you might have this kind of issues. So imagine using AI for research, and then you get to use the ideas without referencing those sources, and then you push that thinking it's your idea, but you're basically just taking someone's intellectual property. So I think that these are some of the areas where some of this misuse could arise. So I'm all for being transparent and being careful about the solutions you work on, how you use these AI tools, and if you must use them, embrace solutions like RAG so that you're having referenced data, even if you are going to be sourcing solutions or sourcing ideas or responses from AI, you have reference data to work with and not just pulling from intellectual properties without traces of where this data was sourced from.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that you were using different APIs and large language models. I've talked with some people that have reservations about using them when they know that they've been built on data that the tool companies took without consent from the people. And usually their main objection is to people using them to generate AI slop. But I think it's also a concern even for other applications where they don't think it's fair for companies like OpenAI or Google to profit from the data that they took without consent. And I'm wondering if you have any concerns like that about using the OpenAI API or the Google speech to text tools, or do you feel like the importance of those language tools outweighs those kinds of concerns in those cases?
I think the concerns are valid. They are valid. For instance, if you look at 11 Labs, I think 11 Labs tries to structure. So, for instance, if you go to the voice library, you have a number of voices, and there's a composition plan for voice actors. So if you clone your voice and make it public for users to be able to work with, then you have the opportunity to earn from that. So that's a healthy way. So I think that more companies should adopt this. There's also a debate on web scraping where companies like LinkedIn, I believe the data on these platforms is theirs or at least under their control and should not be sourced. But then scraping companies are on the other side pushing that these are publicly available data posted by users and so it should be made public. So I think it's not exactly the same debate, but it's quite similar. Look at these companies, they are sourcing, even when you look at legal cases, they seem to lose intellectual property data with intellectual property concerns. So I think that should be discouraged. Of course, it's pulling data from authored books without compensation, without consent, without clearance. It's wrong. And even if it doesn't go notice, or even if it does, I don't support that. But I think that When it comes to publicly available data that is common knowledge, then that doesn't necessarily have a downside, or will I say I'm not really against that. So when it comes to using these APIs in the manner in which I use them mainly for text processing, I try to ensure that if I'm building a solution, maybe for an organization, mostly this I incorporate techniques like RAG, so graph-based RAG or knowledge graphs. So this approach allows me to be able to tap into their own data without having to rely on publicly available data or rely on data sourced from these APIs. So in that way, I'm just using these APIs as a pre-processing tool. I'm processing structured data or
Mhm.
processing it for semantic understanding. But yes, the substance or the knowledge is still sourced from the knowledge graph, which is mainly built as a private data source. This helps me use these tools in an ethical way, so not really breaking some of these ethical concerns. But I think that those having issues with some of this misuse, they are valid, because I also won't want my intellectual property to just be ingested without compensation or acknowledgement. Yes.
Yeah, you mentioned transparency and that you feel like the tool providers that you've worked with or looked at have not been very transparent about sharing where the data came from or claiming that they got it from publicly available sources, even though in many cases that content was copyrighted, even though it was publicly available. I'm wondering, have you seen any tool provider that does this well, like that was actually upfront about where they got their data? It sounds like 11 Labs may have had some more transparency about that, about where the voices came from.
Yeah, so that's a good example. So 11 Labs has made efforts in that regard. And then also, even though Substack is not really an AI company, while working with Substack, I can remember being asked if I want to allow my data to be included in AI training data. So that's a good example of being transparent, because sometimes some companies just hide these policies in their terms of conditions, and then it's just automatic that once your data is on this platform, we will be using it to train AI models, and you don't really have an option to opt out or not. I think having that option to be able to say, okay, I don't want my data to be included in the AI training data, that's a good one. So these are some good examples. Of course, there's a lot of room for improvement, but these are examples of what can be used. ChatGPT, I will need to check. I can't make a comment and whether they do that or they don't, but it would be good if most of these platforms have options to state if you want to include your data for training, or if you want it to be exposed to certain tools or not. But yeah, Stack and 11 apps are good examples that I can think of right now.
If any of them have ever shared any demographic data about representation within the data sets that they use. For instance, there was a study, I was just talking with Rebecca Mbaya about this yesterday, and I thought it was like 4% of the data that went into ChatGPT came from the global south, but I think she said it was actually more like 2%. So it's quite unbalanced in that way. But I haven't seen much as far as any of the providers that are doing really well with getting balanced data sets. I'm wondering if you've heard of any.
I can't recall that. It's very possible maybe I've gotten something like that in my mail, but I can't really recall
Mhm.
going through any document, any report that highlights that information.
Yeah, the only one I've heard of that might be close is Mistral Lechat. They just trained a model, and I think they trained it on over 1,000 different languages. I'm not sure what the geographic representation of those languages is, but at least they were making an effort to support more languages, not just Western English.
That's a step in the right direction.
Yeah. So when you've worked with building AI-based tools or systems, can you share anything about where the data came from and how that data was obtained?
Okay, yes. I'll use an example of the crime watch data that was used. We pulled public news articles, we traced with reports on crime. Since it's Nigeria, monitoring news at reports on organized crime news here in Nigeria, and then we built data extractors to monitor and then extract on a daily basis any news, any crime related article sources. After analysis, whatever we get from the process, that's the structured data or structured outputs extracted from this analysis, after identifying the kinds of crimes that were reported, any key attributes, the entities. So all these were indexed with and attributed. We used technologies like RAG to be able to implement knowledge graphs that made it easy to be able to trace back. So for every insight, when you query the solution, every result comes with a source. So it's very easy to identify and also cross-check this report from the originating news source. This is an example of how data was sourced for a particular project and also how we maintain that it's not building solutions that will suffer from hallucination.
That sounds like a good approach. And the way that you were processing the data and obtaining the data sounds very straightforward. That's good. When we think about our roles as consumers and members of the public, our personal data and content has probably been used by some sort of an AI-based tool or system. Do you know of any cases that you could share, obviously without disclosing any sensitive personal information?
When it comes to recommendations, I would say it almost feels like a conspiracy. You get these reports that some social platforms use your phone mic and then actively monitoring your activity to be able to recommend content or recommend marketing, mainly for marketing purposes, right? I've seen a lot of persons, and sometimes I felt that way as well, where you discuss something now and then few minutes or few hours later, you start seeing it pop up on your screen. You start seeing ads related to
Mm-hmm.
what you just spoke about pop up on your screen. So I try to be slow to jump on that idea that it's actually actively building. Sometimes I just make maybe it's not purely coincidental, but also it's a growing concern for marketing reasons. I think in recent years you will have noted that companies like Apple had restrictions for Facebook on how Facebook was going to use data from Apple users, and it's led to a lot of changes in the way marketing was handled and things like that. I think sometimes in an attempt to process data or analyze data for marketing, to optimize marketing experience, to optimize personal experience, sometimes they could tap into personalized activities that might be sensitive and could be abused. So like scrolling time, the kind of content you like, and then also, even though I don't have a proof, but if there's active listening of your mic or your conversations outside the app, then that's not very healthy. It won't be a very good way to ingest or take in personal data. Yeah.
There was a story about a project that they actually called active listening, where one company was caught admitting that they use what they hear on the microphone and they made them stop doing that. There was something else I read earlier this year that the notifications on our phones end up sharing location tracking data with the app developers, even if we have location sharing turned off, because they track it as part of the metadata for the notifications. And that was
Yes.
a bit of an eye opener. I ended up turning off all the notifications on almost all of my apps after I heard about that.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
it's actually concerning. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a surprise. Do you know any company that you gave your data or content to that actually told you that they might use your information for training an AI system? Or did
Okay,
you
yes.
get
So,
surprised by it?
okay, yes, like I mentioned earlier, Substack is one of those companies, right? So, Substack has clearly stated, okay, giving you the option to be able to say, okay, approve if you want your data to be used for AI training. Aside, I don't remember using any app that explicitly asked for my consent. I can clearly remember Substack, but I can't, no other name comes to mind when it comes to explicitly asking for my personal data for training.
Mhm.
So in most cases, I assume that it's just handled with policies, with changes in policies. It's automatic. Social media platforms.
Yeah, and I know the switches you're talking about in our newsletter for allowing AI training, that is actually Substack trying to set the website so that it will tell the bots and the crawlers not
Yeah,
coming. I don't think Substack uses our writing to train their own models anyway. That's more to try to stop the other bots if someone doesn't want their content to be crawled, to try to stop it. Of
yeah,
course, some of the bots don't respect that setting anyway.
yeah. True,
Yeah, Substack warns us about that, but there's really nothing they can do about it.
true.
I think you had said that the safest thing is just to not post things that you wouldn't be comfortable having shared. Yeah.
Exactly, because even when you look at before the AI training phase, if you look at the Charlie, that's web scraping, the safest way is not to have content you're not comfortable with, or not use any platform that after studying the policies, you're not comfortable with the way they handle their data, then it's better to completely avoid such platforms. Even platforms like LinkedIn have not been able to stop web scrapers from accessing the data they consider private. Twitter has not been able to stop that. They can put in schemes, but these schemes are always bypassed. So it's going to be very difficult to block or to stop. If it's out there on the internet, then it can possibly be accessed. So it's just best to maybe avoid platforms that you don't think have that transparency in place because they can still use it.
Yeah, I logged into LinkedIn earlier today and I noticed they have a banner across the top of the site now saying, we've changed our terms and our privacy policies. I'm going to have to go read
Yes.
those, see what they're trying to do now. Do you know if a company's use of your personal data or your content has ever created any specific issues for you, like privacy concern or phishing or loss of income, anything like that?
No, I don't have any such encounters at the moment.
Okay, that's good. Let's hope it stays that way, right?
I think because of the challenges with scams, I really try to just keep my data off most of these platforms as much as I can. Even when I'm signing up, I have emails I use to sign up on sites I'm not very comfortable with, so that I isolate any possible data breach or things like that. I don't have such issues.
Yeah, that's
You
good.
know,
All right. Well, last question, and then we can talk about anything else that you want. You talked about transparency and trust earlier. I think public distrust of AI and tech companies has been growing. And in a way, that's good because it means that we're more aware of what they're doing and we're saying, hey, wait, we're not happy about that. Is
yes.
there one thing that you think the AI companies could do that would help to earn and to keep your trust? And do you have specific ideas on how they could do that?
Yes, so I think that's a very good question. When you look at transparency, the first step would be to look at what some of the AI companies are doing right and then hope that or encourage others to adopt that. For instance, when it comes to compensation, I know not every company would be able to adopt the model, not every organization can be able to do that. But I think that there needs to be more credit. When you look at large language models now, they have improved compared to 2, 3 years back. To an extent, you have more references, especially when it comes to the public websites. I think the issue is when it comes to intellectual property, you don't really see that being referenced from books or some of these things. But when it comes to public data, there's some improvement with references that are pulled from public websites. So I would say there should be more of such. And then when it comes to transparency of data used for training, there should be more transparency as well. So there should be, just like if you go on Wikipedia, I was working on an article and learning to research to check, just read up a little about the GPT tree, and you can see clearly how the data used for training was outlined. You get the percentages, and then you also can see, okay, common crawl was used, this was used. So there should be more transparency. And even when companies might claim they don't really want to make things open because they want to have an edge over competition, I think that there's still room to be able to compete, protect your competitive advantage while still making your sources clear for users. My personal opinion is that one of the reasons why it might be difficult to have the sources clear is because that will create more room for accountability and will make it easy for court cases. Because if I see my data being used and I didn't approve, I don't want that, then I can easily sue you for that. So I think that's one area that there should be more transparency, maybe an index, like a catalog of all sources used, and then just having that clearly profiled so that users understand what data they are working on, or at least what sources they are building on.
Yeah, that sounds like a good vision. And the question I think then is how do we get there? Do you know of any standards in Nigeria or any initiatives that are trying to motivate companies to do this? Or are there maybe social pressures for companies to comply with standards from other regions like the European Union AI Act or GDPR?
Yes, so in Nigeria currently we have the Nigerian Data Protection Commission. So that's the body that regulates or that enforces data privacy and most of this. So there are currently plans to enforce and encourage companies, data processors, data controllers to adhere to these policies. This year there was an African data conference and it was hosted in Nigeria. A representative from Kenya and other parts of Africa, and I was privileged to attend the conference. And basically, this was one of the things that were discussed, encouraging Nigeria, Africa to take data seriously because as AI keeps making waves, it's very important that data is protected because one very common misuse of data might not even necessarily be from these companies. To look at the abuse of AI for scams, for even inappropriate content like adult content and some of these things. So you see that there's need for sensitization for users to be careful about how their data is processed, and also for companies to be careful about how their employees use data, how they expose data as well. So basically, this is the body that is actually actively pushing for these reforms and for the adoptions for care in data handling in Nigeria. Hopefully, there are some good policies laid out, and hopefully they should be implemented, and we would see better results in a few years to come.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm glad that they are moving forward with that. It's very spotty worldwide. The US is not doing great yet on it, and there's a lot of catching up to do. And hopefully, this will come together sooner than later. So that's my last question. Is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience?
Okay, yeah. So I think for now, the only thing I want to share is yes, I'm actively writing. So I'm very passionate about training and teaching AI enthusiasts. Basically, so if you look at what I have been doing over the years, basically just trying to train and help both organizations and AI enthusiasts to build career in the AI space. So if anyone listening or reading is passionate about building their AI career, because if you look at MIT's recent AI study, a very shocking observation was made that 95% of AI projects at that AI pilot projects were not seen to be very successful. This is because of misalignment in use cases, and also there's a lot of hype and there's a lot of energy behind integrating AI in business. There's a lot of promises about what AI can do. But when it comes to actually implementing this and having it sync with the actual workforce, in practice, many of these implementations feel short because there is still a gap in there's still a gap between understanding what AI can do and separating the hype from what is actually feasible or what's practical. And yes, seeing how AI collaborates with the human skill professional to get work done. So these are some of the things I really highlight. And also when it comes to implementation, I try to outline them in my blogs, in my webinars, in technical workshops. So anyone who is really interested in learning more about this can check me out on my blog and also try to follow up on some of the things I do. And I'm sure that you would find some of them insightful, and I will be very happy to also take in feedback as well.
Yes, I was very happy to come across your blog on Substack. We will have the link to that in the article so that people can find it. But it's Nnitiwe's AI blog, right? There's the title.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much for making time for this interview, Nnitiwe, and best of luck to you in growing your blog.
Thank you for having me too. I really had a great time going through this.
Great. Thank you. About this interview series and newsletter. This post is part of our AI 6P interview series on AI, software, and wetware. It showcases how real people around the world are using their wetware, brains and human intelligence, with AI-based software tools, or are being affected by AI. And we're all being affected by AI nowadays in our daily lives, perhaps more than we realize. For some examples, see post, but I don't use AI. We want to hear from a diverse pool of people worldwide in a variety of roles. If you're interested in being a featured interview guest, anonymous or with credit, please get in touch. 6Ps and AI Pods. AI 6P is a 100% reader-supported publication. All new posts are free to read and listen to. To automatically receive new AI 6P posts and support our work, consider becoming a subscriber. It's free.